What's up, everybody? It's your good sis, DJ Mrs., and welcome to Break the Cycle Stop Gun Violence event with me, your good sis, period, and Amnesty International. If you're not hip to Amnesty International, they're a global movement with more than 10 million people who take injustice very much personally, and they're campaigning for the world where human rights are enjoyed by all. And gun violence affects more people in our communities than anyone else. And you have to think, is it the violence we portray in the music we listen to the most, or is it the overall lack of community resources? So going back to March, when people were limited to travel and we all had to stay home, the crime rate went down. But after the government and after the governor got relaxed with the state order at the stay-at-home order in May, the numbers of gunshot victims treated began to grow. So do you think the uncertainty or the economic stability is the root of the violence, or does it go deeper? So today, Amnesty USA and I will unpack the layer of gun violence and the new solutions to break the cycle of violence once and for all. So let's get right into it, and let me introduce our special guest for this evening. So first we have Walter Patterson. He is the founder of Create Art and Not Violence. What's up, Walter?
What's up? How y'all doing?
Good. So tell us a little bit about what Create Art and Not Violence is. Excuse me.
Okay, so Create Art Not Violence was started in the Central community, the Down the Way projects. So what I did was during COVID, right? When everything was closed down, you had all the schools, the libraries, the recs, everything was closed. And I got, with me being in the community for 33 years, I'm 33 years old, I got the opportunity to get a space. And I was teaching on film, hip hop, and poetry, how to overcome your traumatic experiences by using many forms of art. And I got over 64 kids in the Down the Way projects to cooperate. And once they did that, it kind of decreased the violence for that moment. But once they left them doors, I wasn't responsible for that. But that's what Create Art Not Violence is. It's overcoming your traumatic experience by using different forms of art.
So, and up next we have Miss Maisha Crow, who is the executive director of Cleveland Peacemakers. Hey, Miss Crow.
Hey, girl.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for this platform.
So tell us a little bit about Cleveland Peacemakers.
So Cleveland Peacemakers CPA is a community-led violence intervention, prevention, and restoration services program. So we work with young people who may be gang involved, who are involved in violence, and who are trying to navigate the adult or juvenile justice system. Our goal is to really give young people who are using their skills wrong in their communities a different platform so that they can be a success story and not be looked at as a possibility and not problems in our community. So that's what we do. We work in the hospitals and the communities and in the juvenile and adult justice systems.
Cool. So up next we have Miss Mai Moore, who is the founder of Empowering Youth Exploring Justice.
Hi, everybody. So EYEJ, we are a nonprofit based in Cleveland that drives social justice reform by empowering young advocates for change. We've served 1,600 unique underserved youth through our programming, and we're very much tied to violence in many ways. Our EYEJ Youth Council, which is focused on systemic change and helping certain issues that youth face in dynamic ways, and actually creating actionable change through policy, social policy, programming, research, and youth voice. We've actually worked a lot on this issue and police reform. And, violence personally touches us in a lot of ways, whether, for example, last week, one of our youth council members, his brother was shot 4 times and died. And we actually see a lot of increase in violence through our focus right now on the digital divide and closing it.
And last but not least, we have Mr. Ernest Congressperson, who is the manager of the End Gun Violence campaign for Amnesty International USA.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having us. Thanks for the panelists for joining us this evening. Again, Ernest Congressperson, campaign manager for our gun violence campaign. Amnesty International is a human rights organization located around the world. This section here, Amnesty USA, has been involved with our gun violence work domestically now for about 2 years. And we're looking, and goal is to uplift especially Black and Brown communities and the gun violence that's taking place in those communities. Making sure that those organizations that's doing that great needed work is getting uplifted, getting the funding that they need, being highlighted and at the table, just like many of the other organizations that's out there, but they're doing some great work, and we need to highlight them in the midst of what's going on. So thanks for having us. Thanks for partnering with us to have these conversations, and let's get into it.
Let's get right into it. So I have a question for everybody that's starting. So with gun violence in Cleveland, what do you guys see as the main factor for gun violence amongst the young people?
Well, that's the thing, is gun violence is so complex, because are we talking about, gun violence on the street? Are we talking about, what's happening with these school massacres? Are we talking about AK-47s? Are we talking about police reform? It's complicated. And as we know, some people, especially some youth, they need guns to protect them with everything that's going on right now. And then yet again, we have youth that are being murdered. So it's super complex.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's, we did, as Amnesty, we did a report 2 years ago when we launched the campaign and looked at gun violence, from domestic violence to suicide, everyday violence that we see in our communities, or on what we're talking about tonight. And then as well, a piece of it around police use of force. And as Mike said, I mean, it's so multi-layered that we have to pick the lane we want to deal with. And so, for our young people, right, it stems from the lack of resources. In some of our communities, you have food deserts, and then a lot of it is just survival, going from day to day, try to get to school and back home. And so it's multi-layered situation that we have to continuously pull back the pieces of onion with it.
And I would like to add to that, part of my job is that I'm alerted via text message anytime anyone is a victim of gun violence. So seeing where the young people are being shot, which neighborhood the violence is up in, and just having these relationships with young people, I would like to believe that, one, young people are carrying guns for safety. I do feel like a lot of young people that I get to work with, that guns are now looked at as a status symbol and no longer a safety component. It's just that so many of them are posing with their guns on Instagram, writing songs about it, literally using it as the newest iPhone. So sometimes I think what's missing the most is proper education. When I was growing up, I learned everything about guns from New Jack City, Boys in the Hood, and that's where my education came from. And I think in order to get in front of this, it's going to have to be, how do we educate the young people in our community and their families around gun education? Because the accessibility to getting a gun for a young person is easy. If I take the gun, if we say we're removing 500 guns off the streets, those young people can get 500 more guns. So it's so easy to get a gun. And knowing how important social media is, if I post a picture with my gun on social media, I'm going to get comments, I may go viral. And now I'm that person, I have that sense of belonging. So part of me and my work, I'm trying to figure out how to let young people know that a gun is not a hobby unless you know the education piece behind it. And it's not a status symbol like Jordans or iPhone. It's literally something that can end someone's life, change the direction of your life and you don't know how to use it correctly.
So so I guess I ended in my opinion, so the main factor to me is it's the environment, right? So just in my opinion, from my personal experience growing up in the projects, it was always been generational. So you have my brothers, my uncles, everybody else was involved with this generational neighborhood feud. So it's the environment you grew up in, you inherit this neighborhood beef, and it's only right for real, because this is how we grew up our entire lives. We watched our fathers, we watched our uncles, we watched our brothers all get into this beef. So it's it's the environment. It's a structural racism issue as well. So yeah, I would say the environment.
Can I just add in there too? I agree with everything you're saying. And also there's this social emotional part and the mental health part. because a lot of these cases that you hear about, arguments are sometimes over the stupidest things. And there's this reaction of, because when we were growing up, it was about using your fists, and now they have this, machine basically. And then it goes back to your points about, the lack of jobs or lack of resources. And so it's like this cycle that needs to be broken.
That's good. So, Ms. Moore, so Cleveland has one of the biggest digital divides in the U.S. So, do you think the lack of overall internet broadband contributes to the increase of crime in today's youth?
It's straight up, like, I am really worried for youth right now in Cleveland. Just from multiple levels of, like, I mean, today I was on a call with MC STEM juniors to, all these high level whatever Clevelanders. The way that we're handling things is there's no sense of urgency here. We are taking years to figure out how to close the digital divide. We actually, EYJ is literally updating our website, should be live in about an hour. We actually have the history of the digital divide on there. And if you guys see the timeline that our team put together, it is heartbreaking. And I think the community definitely deserves to know what the truth is, that Cleveland, for example, has been working on this since year 2000, the digital divide. So the point is that this lack of internet access, this lack of, a lot of kids, if you talk to different principals, I mean, you have anywhere from 15 to 75% of the kids that are actually doing online learning. So where are the rest of the kids, right? Because the parents have to work. They don't take the school seriously. So of course, naturally kids want to, mess around and get into things. Right. And so it goes back to your point about, the environment. Like, it is our responsibility as a community to not only be taking care of these youth, but to provide these resources, to provide the jobs, to break the systemic racism. And I always say, I was talking to the kids earlier because they're like, oh, we need to talk more within our community, which I think is brilliant. And I want to say to the crowd and to everyone that's listening is that any idea that you have around gun violence and solutions, speak up. This is the time for innovation and change. But also what I want to say is to youth or anybody that's talking about gun violence, go outside. Don't only talk within your community or who you know. Go out to new people, talk to them, because it is the community. When we say community, we're talking about all of Cleveland. Everybody is responsible for this.
For sure.
And always the weight ends up going on the youth. I hate it. I shouldn't even have to have a nonprofit. I should not have to do this work. We say to youth, hey, we've dumped all our problems on you. You go fix this.
Right.
No, it is adults in I don't care what color you are, what background, I don't care who you are in the city. We are all responsible.
Thanks.
And just really briefly, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Sometimes as a separate organization, you can feel like you're fighting this problem by yourself, and that no one else is doing the work. And the crazy thing is that Cleveland has so many great programs who are aligned in mission, but our city is so competitive and not really they don't like to collaborate. Yes. So it seems like we're not pushing towards the goal, which we're not. But I think if people look at gun violence and the digital divide and the importance of our youth as a Cleveland problem and not a Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance problem or a Walter problem or my problem or Amnesty problem, and just look at it as a humanity problem, I think that we'll do more with a shared approach, like a united front. Like, this is a shared safety plan, and if we want to make any progress, we have to do it together and not rely on a single organization to do it alone and make the impact that the city needs.
Well, people don't care because certain people, it doesn't impact them.
Right.
So how do you show them that it impacts them? We just did this, all this research about, Tamir Rice, the case and how much money they paid out. And it was like, $32. Every single taxpayer in the city of Cleveland, around $32, everyone has paid to support that. Approximately. Don't hold me exactly. But my point is that this is coming out of your taxpayer money, out of our mental health. I mean, we're spending $550 million combating toxic stress. Let's be preventative. And it is everybody's responsibility. And we must demand and hold accountable. We don't do a good job of that. We don't know how to hold people accountable. And we don't know how to think outside the box, and we are not open-minded.
For sure. Okay. And you better preach, Miss Moore, okay? So, Ernest, I have a question for you. So, I understand that Amnesty is supporting a piece of federal legislation titled Break the Cycle of Violence Act. So, can you explain a little bit more about that and how our community support is important for this legislation?
Most definitely. So going back to what the sisters both just said in regards to, there's organizations doing this work locally, that are doing it in their own silos. They may be doing it out their basement or what have you. And funding is always a major piece of that. And as Amnesty International, as a human rights organization, right, we feel we can't fight for other human rights if you're not alive. And so gun violence most definitely is a human rights issue, in our mind. And we're trying to make sure we get that message out. But the Break the Cycle of Violence Act is a piece of federal legislation that was introduced last year by Senator Cory Booker and Congressman Horsford, that would provide federal funding for community-based organizations that's doing this great work that no one knows about. Many times these organizations are dealing with state and local municipalities for their funding. And so according to who's in the seat, who's the governor, who's the mayor, that funding could come and go. It could get reduced. And especially during this time now, we got COVID. We had a whole 2020 where funds was redirected. Funds went other places to cover costs. And many of these organizations have been losing their money across the country. And so the Break the Cycle of Violence Act will provide federal funding for these organizations to continue to do the work, no matter who's in their local governor's seat, who's in their local mayor's seat, what the attitude is from those municipalities. This funding will continuously be there so the work can continue and not start this year, end next year, start back up 2 years from now. It can be consistent, and that trust, that ability for those community members will be there. And so we need, everybody that's listening, in the Cleveland area and from anywhere else, to contact your congressperson, contact your senator. We just got off an election. We're not done. We got work to do. So we need to contact them. They could go to our website, amnestyusa.org, the gun violence page. There's a tweet action. You can sign a petition. You could do a phone call. It's very simple and easy. And sitting at home, you could do and urge your congressperson to reintroduce and pass the Break the Cycle of Violence Act so we could continue the work that Sister Moore is doing, that Brother Patton is doing, that Sister Crow is doing, and many others across the country.
For sure. So how do all of you feel that community-based organizations, how can they help curb the gun violence in Black and brown communities?
I mean, I partner with several organizations, and what I do notice and what I do go through my own experience, that those organizations get with the ones that's really on the ground doing the work, and with funding. So when you think of organizations, you think of funding. So they meet with those that's on the ground and give them funding, because a lot of the times when you see these organizations coming to the community, they can't gravitate to the residents in which they're trying to serve. So you gotta get with the ones that's already down there serving with the familiar face. And that's what I see with the organizations that I partner with. They like to fund the people that's on the ground so they can get the message across.
Mm-hmm. I agree with Walt. It's that a lot of people have great solutions and great programs that may work in neighborhoods that they never frequent. So they need the voices, and they need the lived and shared experiences of the people who are employed by or volunteering their time to make the communities a lot safer. So people who are not afraid, and that are passionate about making sure that young people are alive and free, are the people who needs to be in the community. Because again, a lot of stuff happens around board tables, but a lot of boots are not on the ground. So there'll be a lot of people pushing money out, and then sometimes have unrealistic expectations and deliverables, where it's all about relationships. And it's that community serving organizations like myself and other organizations on this call, is that when we do the work, we come there with hopes to find a solution. So it's not that we're coming there, finding out information and leaving, because the problems are going to take time to work on and work through. So it's all about follow up. It's all about staying consistent. And even when it's hard and even when passion is not enough, you got to make sure that you're staying there for the young people who are not at those tables and who are not sharing their stories to be able to be the voice to eventually break the cycle. But sometimes the wrong voices are at the table, and you always got to make sure that people know who you show up for when you're at that table. Like, I'm going to show up as a Black woman for the Black community all the time at any table with my hot fries ready. So just got to be ready.
So Walter, with you being able to work with some of our most talented youth in the city, does music and creative expression glorify the violence, or do you just feel like it's reality of the troubled youth coming to light?
I think it's a little bit of both. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, you got these young guys out here making this music, but that's their environment. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what they see every day. And then I hit back to what Maisha said a little earlier about social media. It's trending. So if you go on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you go on what's the new stuff they got? TikTok. Yeah. They got those things and everything. Like, if it's trending, like if you got guns, videos, it's trending. So what I did find out working with students and working with kids for a long time is that nobody wants to be alone. Everybody wants to be accepted. So when everything is trending, like when it's come to guns and dancing and all that stuff in these videos, people gonna do the same stuff. You get what I'm saying? Like, everybody just want to do the same thing because nobody wants to be left out. So yeah, of course, like that's what's going on. It's both of them. You know what I'm saying? It's really just following trends.
Definitely. I have to agree with you with me being a DJ and kind of being in the music industry myself and hearing a 16 or 17-year-old tell their story and really listening and be like, wow, this is what you had to go through. And then you have some people that are older than that age, have never even held a real gun, but they're talking about those things and influencing these kids to do certain things. So I definitely agree with you, Walter.
I'm watching young guys in my hood, like, you know what I'm saying? I'm watching young guys in my hood make songs about killing, and then a week later they end up dead. Like, my next door neighbor, like, these are people that stay in my community that I'm watching make these songs. And once they make these songs, a week later they gunned down. You get what I'm saying? So it's like what they speaking into existence. It's like we mimicking Chicago, but we only got 380,000 residents. Chicago got 2 million. So we losing. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, most definitely.
Facts. So Maisha, did you want to add in?
No, I was just like speaking to like Walt, is that, you know, it's so many young people, including myself. I spend a lot of time in the virtual space, like trying to message whatever. And I think the correlation between what's real and what's not, like putting comments and likes over communities and love, is the problem. Like, everybody is doing it for comments and likes, and then you get into your community and you don't know how to respond. Like, you're so used to being in this space that you're spending most of your waking hours to watching whatever your mind is tailored to, whatever is trending. And it's just like, yo, we got to get people back to understanding that this virtual space is very temporary. But when you come out into the real world, like, there's no deleting those 40 characters. There's no deleting the post. Like, once a life is lost, it's lost. Once the choice is made, it's made. And I think young people just get so caught into like this virtual space, and there's no divide no more. Nobody knows what's real from fake. And that's the problem. Until we can get back to communities over comments and likes and love over likes, like, we're gonna always have an issue, because the accessibility and the time frame and not being able to disconnect from one virtual space to the real world is a problem.
Exactly.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry. I'll chime in there. That self-love is so important, but also, you know, these kids need a resource to be able to share what they're going through and to heal. I mean, that's one of our programs, YODJ, Youth Online Discussing Justice. That's where we've served 1,600 unique youth to be able to be in a safe environment where they can trust people and have honest dialogue and not get criticized or judged or, you know, be called, you know, you're not cool, all that kind of stuff. And so that mental health and that that love is so important.
Definitely. For sure. So, Maisha, you already explained a little bit about what Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance is, but what are some of the things that it mainly focuses on?
So what we focus on the most, especially with the increase in gun violence, is just being very strategic and intentional about following up in neighborhoods where shots are fired. I think someone mentioned earlier, like, how do we focus more on on the preventative side of it? Like, and how do we switch to an and both model? Like, how do we prevent and respond? How do we follow up and, build those relationships? And it's not an either or. But with violence increasing so much, we do deploy to scenes where shots are fired to make sure that the community has a voice so that we at a street level can figure out how to diffuse or stop further retaliation and then engage those youth who may eventually become the shooters. Like, I think about how often my team deploys to these scenes and say, we'll get 10 alerts throughout a week. And I never think about, or I think people never think about that 10-year-old who deploys to those same scenes in his hood. Like, eventually he's going to feel like he needs to get a gun and become the shooter because he's unsafe. So thinking about the mental health component of it all is that eventually, like, none of this is going to make sense. And I'm going to have to get a gun because this can be my body next time if I do not feel safe. So engaging those people in the community who feel like violence is acceptable and it's the only option. And I think that's the mindset now, is that with resources being slim to none, violence is the only option. If violence is gonna, and this is what I shared in one of my board meetings, is that if I'm engaging with a young person and he's out here being involved in violence and he's robbing people, but this violent lifestyle is helping him with all the stuff that he's battling at home. Like, if I don't rob, I don't eat. If I don't rob, my mom kicked me out and I'm homeless. If I don't do this, then my situation is worse. And what do you give somebody who only option is violence because it's helping to reduce any of the factors and issues that he have at home? So you have to have something that's extremely tangible and right now to give a young person who is saying, like, violence is my only option. I do not want to do it, but it's my only option. And I'm oftentimes reminded of Tyreek and Ghost, like in the Power series. Like, he didn't want to choose this violent lifestyle, and it's just like most of young people don't want to do it. But being a member of the Black community, I know that if a young man is not bringing in any money, that the pressure is like, yo, you either going to work or you going to get out. And like, being homeless only wants people, like, being homeless as a young person, it's natural for them to want to join a gang or do anything else that may be destructive to their community. So just trying to engage those young people before they feel like they need to find that sense of belonging in anything else, because the narrative is, once you turn 18, you better figure it out by any means necessary, get it out the mud, do it, like all of this stuff. And it's just like, no, let's give the resources that they need so that they do not think that violence is the only option, because it's not.
And I just wanted to chime in there. Like, I do believe that a lot of youth in Cleveland really do care and they do want peace. And so teaching them, I think UIJ does a good job of teaching how to take action on making this topic urgent. And also getting the word out there about how this impacts them when they see a youth die, when they watch the news and another youth dies, or they hear these stories. So if any youth are listening, my advice to you is figure out what part of gun violence really impacts you, meaning gun violence is so broad, right? So drill it down to what really impacts you. And if you have a personal story, share it, speak up, get it out there, get it out to your community, get it out to people that, again, you may not normally talk to.
Really quickly, I saw this kid in a central neighborhood where Watt is from, and he had like 12 tags around his neck with faces of his peers who have lost their life to gun violence. Yes. And I just asked the question, like, yo, it, like, just acting like I did not know, like, yo, what are all these pictures? And he's like, yo, these are all of my friends who died due to gun violence. And I was just like, yo, how did that make you feel? And he's just like, it makes me want to get revenge, but I don't want to die. Like being a young person now, when your homies are victims of gun violence, you just have this, like, it comes with the territory. Like, when I was younger, my homegirl is in a fight and I'm there and I see somebody about to swing on her, like, automatically I got to swing too. So like, when you're young and your young person is, your friend is being a victim of gun violence, everybody's expecting for you to retaliate. And if you do not retaliate, it's like, yo, you was never down. Like, you was never about this life. And it's just like, imagine the pressures of a young person. Like, yo, I just wanted to play games with my friends. I just wanted to go to open gym, and it's just like the same young person said he owns 25 shirts with faces on it. He's been to 35 balloon releases, and it's just like at 32. I haven't lost a friend. Like, I haven't lost a friend, but yet we got 10-year-olds who are going to more funerals than birthday parties. Like, yo, that is not okay. And then oftentimes people from other communities will say, oh, these young people are desensitized and they don't care. But it's just like because also I'm a social worker and a therapist, so I have this holistic model that in order to cure violence, you got to get to the underlying issues. Like, what happened before the shots are fired? What happened before this young person pick up a gun? And until we get to the root of it, we're still just going to be reacting to all of the lives that are lost. So like, we have to focus on what happened before, and then think about if young Maisha grew up in a household where mental and emotional abuse was all that I heard, and then I get into the community, and the first thing that somebody asks me is like, yo, how do you feel about all the gun violence? Like, why you ain't asking me how I felt about my mom talking down on me, or nobody inspiring me, or nobody telling me that they love me? And it's like, yo, we got to focus on the four walls of that house before we make our issue, which is a community issue, their problem. Like, yo, how was your morning? What did you eat? Is there anybody there? And then ask them, like, yo, what does it feel like to walk into the community where you're dealing with problems from from the moment you open your eyes to the time you go to bed, sleeping in the bathtub because you don't want to be the next victim of gun violence? Like, this is so much deeper than the root of it. And the surface, and we got to dig deeper.
So, Maisha, you hit it on the nail on the head. Let's get to the root of this. The root of this is systemic oppression and how this country was formed. So it goes back to what Ernest was saying is we need to hold our government officials, our new president accountable, right? Because it's like the same old conversation, maybe some new ideas here and there, but it's the same thing over and over. Yeah. So to change the mindset in the culture and the community, think outside the box, speak up, talk to people outside. That's why UIJ is powerful, because we are this connector in society, right? We know people, we have very good friends on the street, and we know people who are running the city. I'm not saying, it's just, it is what it is, because we need to have people outside of this cycle care and make action. We must demand it. Must.
Right. Yeah, I think, are we going to switch on? Go ahead. So I think, Maisha, and Maya, I think y'all both right, man. I like a lot of the times we address these issues without getting to the root. Like, for one, like, there's one kid that I always talk about that's in his household, and he's staying in his household, and he has ADHD. He has lead poison, right? And lead poison, which causes brain damage, and he comes out into the world. And then you got this other kid in this household who mom is laid off, or father is laid off due to the pandemic. And then when these two kids leave that household and they meet in the streets, they don't want to kill each other, but their attitude is just boiling, and they hurt each other because of the systemic issues from the household. It's like we in a central community where people get murdered all the time, and we don't have a trauma unit. You get what I'm saying? Like, our only hospital don't have a trauma unit. We don't have a grocery store. So that's a food desert. It's just so much. We got a high infant mortality rate, but this is all structured.
Oh, totally structured. Yeah. I mean, I just, it's crazy. I was yesterday, I just said we're updating our website, whatever. And I was asking the youth, like, let's list everything that you guys are going through right now. And I wish I could show you this picture. I mean, unfortunately, it wasn't news to me, but the list is at least like 55 different issues that youth are going through. This epidemic of toxic stress. So gun violence is important. It's part of it, but it comes down to reform. You've got to get to the root of it. We've got to break the cycle. I mean, I love this name of this. For real.
Yeah, most definitely.
My question for everybody is, what do you guys think is the most major hurdle in Cleveland to ending gun violence? Or not just in Cleveland, all around in general in the inner cities?
Ooh, right. Mike, you can start. Go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, all I have to say is I don't think that we're ever going to get just rid of guns completely. But, focusing on things like banning AK-47s and white supremacy, I think is a good focus. But honestly, we've got to pour resources and have things available for kids, jobs, resources, things to do other than what they currently have.
Yeah.
Meet them where they're at. Ask them what they want to do. Provide it to them. Listen to them. Make it happen. In Cleveland, I'll tell you the problem in Cleveland is so many times kids are told something and we don't follow through. That is wrong. And then you ask, oh, why is there distrust? What are you talking about?
Right.
I think overall, and I get, fortunately, unfortunately, get to have a bird's eye view of it because I cover the country, and have these conversations and deal with it in different spots. I mean, I live here in Chicago, and so already, everybody knows the challenges we have here in Chicago. But I mean, I think the hurdle, that I see across the board is, as Mike said, just resources. If we look at communities, if you look at suburban communities or communities where, white folk live, that have parks, they have community centers, they have after school programs, they have computer labs, they have. You don't see the same level of gun violence in their communities, or violence period in their communities.
Right.
And so I think it really comes down to one of the things is really the resources, and as Mike said, thinking out of the box. How can we do the same thing but in a different way? Right? We can't keep saying, all we can do is get 20 footballs, put them in the park, and okay, that's going to solve the problem. But it's other things that young people want to do. There's new things that young people want to do. And so how do we take those new things that they want to do and implement them, that may not look the same way it did when we was coming up, but it's the way that young people, want to have fun now.
You guys, it's easy. We overcomplicate things.
Yes.
I was just on a call with 100 youth talking about their ideas about gun violence, human trafficking. I mean, brilliant. They wanted to make these devices. I mean, brilliant things. It's all about money.
Yeah.
Pour the money. The community knows what they need.
Yeah.
They need it, right.
But it's still so like when you say a hurdle, like what I think of when I think of a hurdle is you got to understand there's probably somebody on here right now in the comment section who really for gun violence, like who really from the hood and really believe that guns is the only way. I think that's the hurdle because I constantly deal with coming out of that life and getting on this side of the fence. So I'm from that life, right? But the guys that I left behind from that life is steady still pulling these young guys to that life. And it's me on this side of the fence trying to pull them to this side of the life. So understand that we're up against people who really believe gun violence is the only way.
But it's the same thing though. But it's the same thing with them. I know these guys too. It's the same thing with them. They are children too.
No, I'm talking about adults.
We're not listening to them. We're not really empowering who they are, what their calling truly is.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, I think when I think about the hurdle, I think that Cleveland has a lot of resources. I think that they are spread all over the city in all different silos to many small groups to many big organizations. And I think what happened with the big hurdle is that the pandemic peeled the Band-Aid off a lot and said that y'all thought y'all was doing a lot, but y'all ain't doing enough. And now we got this big problem of like, yo, what can we do? How do we think more innovatively and what are next steps? And it's just like, yo, for many years and many decades, people was skating and people was doing the bare minimum. And now it just requires a lot more. And a lot of people ain't up for that work. It takes a lot of work to find a solution, and everybody ain't signed up for it. Everybody probably signed up for paychecks, and when paychecks ain't enough, passion need to step in, and when passion ain't enough, people need to get out the way. And it's a lot of old school leaders that are stuck in that way, and when people like myself, Maya and Walt and Ernest and DJ Mrs. come to the table, we're like, nah, bro, that ain't working. Y'all not really here for the kids, and now we got a problem. So it's just like,
it's happening.
The leaders, these new leaders that's coming with like, yo, I understand because I was once that kid, or I understand because I still got family in that life. People not trying to understand it. Like, I'm not just coming to you with a scholarly article. I'm coming to you from lived and shared experiences. I'm coming to you because I hear those gunshots. I'm coming to you because I'm going to these funerals. I'm coming to you because the people that I know are dying, and people are not really trying to hear it. So when I think about the hurdles, I think about Cleveland just needed to come together again. Like I mentioned, we need to be united in our efforts. Like when a kid loses their life, there needs to be an urgency to say, yo, where's the council person? Where's the mayor? Where's the chief of police? Where's the Walt? Where's the Mai? Where's the Maisha? All of us need to come together and say, yo, what's up? One life is too much. Like, what are we talking about? Like, I'm not going to another meeting to have another meeting. So what are we talking about?
Right. Let's get to action.
The money is there. Let's get the right people at the table. Let's get the right people at the table who believe gun violence is the way, and see why they believe that. Like, we want everybody that's safe at the table who can articulate. Get the people at the table who can't articulate, and let's make it make sense.
Yes.
But people don't want those people at the table. Like, the people that are living in the down the way and in the central neighborhood and other places that people read headlines about but don't really go, bring them to the table so that we can get the solution. But until people and leaders stop being afraid and really want to do the work and really want to get to the root of all the problems, it's going to continue to happen. So the hurdle was fear in leadership, the hurdle was fear of change, and the hurdle was people that talk a lot and not doing nothing.
And that's why we have to demand it and we have to speak up. And you have to bring in people from all backgrounds, because there are good people here. And I think the other problem is we're in a society where we have level 5 problems and we have level 3 leaders. And we're not doing a good job. We're not taking the responsibility to say, this is our next generation. We need to empower them and grow them. We don't do that.
Right.
So, Ms. Moore, tell us about the official launch of Connect Cleveland and what it will mean for the youth today.
Oh, the hashtag Connecting Cleveland is just a giving campaign. It's actually ending whenever the 31st is, I think Sunday or something. But we have a fundraising event right after this that I'm headed into. But we're raising dollars. We're raising $100,000. Honestly, every penny counts. We are not rich. We are very lean, and we need to empower EYJ and elevate EYJ for multiple reasons, growing our programs, to empower our youth, give them stipends. The EYJ Youth Council is very, very important. They're working on major initiatives right now. So money is important.
For sure. So, Walter, I have a question for you. How essential are extracurricular activities to decreasing the youth violence?
That's very, very important, because like what's happening now, as you guys all know, like we all know what's happening with COVID, and during COVID, we in the central community we have 15 homicides, and 3 of them was under the age of 16, right? So you had all the recs closed. Everywhere that the kids would play, it was closed. So that was so it was very pivotal, because even now when schools are opening back up, all the schools are open except for the CMSD, right? So you got St. Ignatius that's 20 minutes away from East Tech. What's the difference between St. Ignatius and East Tech, and why aren't our kids back in school? So like having curriculums and different platforms for these kids is very important, because if we don't, we're gonna continue to lose them to gun violence, because they're all pushed into the streets. And I just watched it. I seen it all summer. All these different kids. We had a kid by the name of Mike Klein Bennett, who was a football player, a prominent football player, who was probably going to go to college and do everything that he wanted to do, but he was gunned down during like recreation center hours. Everything was closed. And this is one of the kids in my youth programs. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, it's very important. It's very important. But then again, as we continue to talk about structured racism, when I was in Parma paying my car insurance, they had everything open. And I just couldn't understand it. I called the councilwoman, like, what's going on? Like, why ain't nothing open in our community, but it's open in Parma? You can't tell me that it's a difference besides the environment. So, yeah, it's very important, because I watched kids die from my youth program this summer, well, the 2020 summer. He probably would still be alive. Like I mentored a kid that's on the Glenville basketball team that was a great player, but since he been out of school, he ain't playing nowhere else. And I just recently seen on Instagram with a gun, and it's something that he would never do. And I knew he wouldn't do, but he just got so much time on his hands. He don't have anything going on. All of our kids that's in the inner city playing for our basketball teams, they out in Richmond and Parma and different places in Menor playing for their teams. But all our schools are closed. Like, I got a daughter who sits in here at home online who can't stand online school. Her grades decreased. You get what I'm saying? Because of online school. So having, just to answer the original question, having those curriculums and those platforms open is very important, because if we don't, we're going to continue to lose our kids. It's very important. It's very important to keep the communication. Like, I argue or go back and forth with people because they say school starts at home, and I understand that. But understand this, you can't take away the communication. You can't take away the talks they have at lunchroom. You can't take away the prom, the homecomings, the pet rallies. That's what you can't take away from these kids. And that's what we're taking away when we take away school, when we close the recs, when we close down our platforms and our curriculums. We're taking away their connections and their interactions.
Definitely, and I agree with you all the way. I feel like the extracurricular activities have something to do with their mental state as well, and it plays a big part on mental stability, not being able to be that young and be able to interact with your friends. And when I was younger, I had older parents, so it's a lot of stuff I was going through that they couldn't relate to, and I was happy that I could go to school to be able to talk to my homegirls and talk to my homeboys about what I'm really going through, and talking to other students that really understand me. So I completely 1000% agree with you. Extracurricular activities for the kids are very much important. And Maisha, so if you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would you tell yourself when you were in high school, if you were in high school right now, 2021?
Oh, Lord. In 2020, it was so hard. In 2021, what would I tell myself if I was in high school? Don't believe the hype. Everything ain't what it seems to be on Instagram and social media. Just continue to do what you love. Stay focused. Man, it's just, I don't know. Like, I think knowing that the social media is the biggest aspect of this generation, I would just say, love yourself, baby girl, or nobody will.
Facts. Anybody else want to chime in?
I was going to say the same thing. I wish that I knew all about self-care. I mean, that wasn't even a concept or a word when I was growing up. And to just, I heard this great quote last week. It was something about, be, oh God, let me look it up because I've got to tell you guys. Sorry, skip me. Sorry.
So what you looked at, I would tell myself, I think most definitely what Maisha said, love yourself, because, before everybody else or nobody else will if you don't love yourself, and you got to be authentic. Like, be your authentic self. Don't change, don't reduce yourself just to make other people feel comfortable, make them feel happy or what have you. Be who you are, and most definitely, be mindful of this whole social media thing.
And I would say just watch the words you speak. You know what I'm saying? Because the things that you put out is what you get back. So that would be my biggest advice. I wish I would have learned that as a kid, because everything that you put out is what you get back. So if you promoting negativity, if you on Instagram with the guns, most likely that's going to come back your way. So just watch what you put out and make sure you put out positivity. You can get that back.
Yeah.
I would definitely have to tell myself where the social media is the biggest thing, because you would think the girl next door is the richest girl in the world, and you just feel like you got to keep up. So, the self-love thing is a big thing. But social media is something that I'll have to tell myself, don't trip too much about it. Be who you are, love yourself, and love everything that comes with you.
Okay, I found it. Sorry, I have to share this. It's important to be aware of the world versus ride the wave of the world.
Yeah.
Love that. So all of you have either worked or partnered with community-based organizations. So what is the benefit of these organizations on reducing gun violence, and how does the funding or lack thereof funding hurt the work of these organizations?
Ooh. I mean, a battle that we face all the time is that not all money is good money. And so we've honestly sacrificed ourselves a lot because I refuse. I have integrity, and I have my responsibility to protect these kids. And a lot of people assume like, oh, we're getting money from all over. No, we've denied a lot of people and a lot of organizations. So money is important if the right, values are behind it and the right intentions are behind it. Money is honestly the most important thing. I mean, how do you make anything happen without money? It's the society we live in.
I think the hardest thing about being a leader of a nonprofit organization Most of my budget is to pay my team to do the work. So when I look at, for an example, if my budget is $1 million, most of that money is for salaries. Mm-hmm. So whatever is left over, it's like we got a penny pinch. And then I think the hardest thing about getting access, kind of like what Mai said, is that when you apply for grants and apply for funding, the unrealistic expectations and of them wanting to see success and what success looks like. And when you're dealing with something such as reducing incidents of violence amongst young people, if young people are still getting killed, you'll have people saying, well, we gave you $600,000. Why is young people still dying? And it's just like, yo, if I had a magic wand, you better know that it will be more than $600,000 that you're paying me. So it's just like, be realistic that if I had the cure to violence, like I'll for sure spread it all over the world so that we can save lives. But I don't. But what I do have is that I have people who are passionate, people who are credible, people who are going to show up to work when no one else does, and people who care about our future and our young people who are continuing to be underserved and overlooked and oftentimes underprepared for the real world. So it's just like where there's lack of money, it's made up in passion and hard work and integrity and keeping the work alive despite budget cuts, despite the attitudes of the community, despite it all. If we do not show up, who will? And there are others, but knowing how much passion and how much commitment and how much hurt, because a lot of this work is rooted in trauma. And you get these trauma bonds. And the reason why I go so hard in this work, because I know I need to be who I needed when I was younger. And if I don't have that sounding voice or that sounding board, then there can be another Maisha who will not be a success story. So like sometimes you just got to tap into yourself and say, if money wasn't a problem, what would I do? And you just got to do it. Because if you rely on others to dictate how money is moved around or what you get and what you do not get, then the problem is still going to be there. So you just got to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, and these kids can feel it. Like these kids know when you're just doing something for the money and when you know what I'm saying, you're really involved with them. So, my thing is just always connecting with those, because I was once that same kid. Like the organization would come in and we would like not pay them no attention because we just felt like y'all was here just to show your face and get some money and leave. So it's just always important to work with those who's passionate just as you. Like that's how I feel about it.
For sure.
And I just want to say, like, give us a break.
Come on.
I don't even know how else to say it. Like, we are working hard. We are dedicated. We are committed. Like, stop giving us some, like Maisha was just saying, like, stop giving us some random excuse because of this or that. I mean, come on.
Right.
The impact is there.
Right. Thanks. So, Ernest, I would like for you to explain to our viewers how important it is for them to sign the Break the Cycle of Violence petition.
Yeah, once again, so, you've heard like all of this great information that these three organizations are doing. And so there's many more out there, in Cleveland, in other cities. So sign a petition. If you go to amnestyusa.org, sign the petition, call your senators, call your congressperson that you possibly just elected back to office and urge them to reintroduce and pass the Break the Cycle of Violence, because that's where that federal funding will come to help keep these organizations doing the great work that they're doing. Also, for our young people that are listening, we have an essay contest. We have a high school prize as well as a college student prize. It's $500 for high school students and $1,000 for college students, an essay contest on how gun violence has affected you and or your community. And you can get that information as well at amnestyusa.org, amnestyusa.org. Get information on the essay contest. Come on, young people, come get this money.
And that's just that on that. So go sign that petition. I know it takes no longer than 2 seconds to do. So from here, go and do that. And if you're a parent in here, try to get your kid into doing this essay. It's free money and they get to talk and express freely. So, all right. Does anybody have any closing remarks or anything they would like to tell the people before we tap out?
I just want to say, sorry, Maisha.
No, I was going to say, I just would like to say Shout out to everybody in Cleveland who is doing this work, and they're not always invited to this platform. I know that there's a lot of people who do not get the recognition that they deserve. I just want to say thank you. Because of you, lives have been saved. Although lives continue to be lost, I just appreciate you all. And if you want to collaborate with me, please feel free to email me or call me or whatever. My office is located in the Slavic Village neighborhood, but with more human power and coverage and passion, we can all take over our city. If Georgia can flip, then we can flip and make sure that the narrative is that people need to be alive and free. Less body bags.
I would like to say, always speak to my experience and to the community I come from, because I believe that if I change at least where I come from in my front yard, then that's like changing the world. I believe if we all paid attention to what's going on in our front yard, then that's a part of changing the world. So I would like to speak to my community and the young guys that live in similar communities to mine and just say, put the guns down, man. For 2021, let's live longer. Put the guns down.
And I just want to say to the youth, believe in yourself. Those ideas, those solutions that you have, that creativity that you have, speak up about it. Keep speaking up and do not give up. Do not give up.
Most definitely. And for me, all of you, thank you for the work that you're doing. And for those, as Maisha said, those that are not here, thank you for the work that you continue to do. And we need everybody, the ones that are actively part of an organization, ones that are not. We need you to get involved. You can most definitely, do the political side of it and go to amnestyusa.org, sign a petition, but then you can also get active in your community. Everybody has some way, you're in contact with somebody. And so you can help make a difference, even if it's in your household, even if it's, on your block. If we go and do this thing person by person, we can make some changes in 2021.
Y'all heard them. Go sign that petition. College students and high school students, if you tapped in, please go do that essay ASAP. Parents, let your kids know about it. Both you guys sign that petition. Do what you need to do. And if we want to see change, we got to be the change. So let's continue to do what we need to do for our youth and our community. Put the guns down and let's keep on living life how we should. Thank you, everybody, for tapping in.
Thank you.